Hello, everybody. What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Ben on Sports. Hope you all have enjoyed some off time, enjoyed your NFL weekends. But as you can see today, we are introducing another sport, another league. We are getting into the NBA today. NBA season starts Tuesday, October 22nd. I'm pretty excited about it. I hope you guys are as well. And we're just going to do some season-long predictions, whether it's records, playoff candidates, championship caliber teams, season award winners, all that kind of stuff. I hope you all enjoy. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get into it, I just want to say I'm doing this division by division. Divisions don't matter in the NBA anymore. I hope everybody knows that. If you don't, this is your uh, update, I guess. Divisions do not matter in the NBA, but the reason why I'm still grouping them by divisions is because rather than having 15 teams for the East and 15 teams for the West, I think it makes more sense to group these up into their 5-team divisions, and it makes it easier to see and conceptualize, at least in my opinion. So we're going to do it division by division, but remember, winning your division doesn't really mean anything like it does in every other sport. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to start with the Eastern Conference, getting into the first division, the Southeast Division. We have last year's standings on the left. As I don't think I really need to go over that. I think most people know, Hornets and Wizards, not very good, pretty much by design. Hawks, maybe supposed to be good, not really. And then the Heat and Magic. Magic were taking a big step up last year under the leadership, I guess, of Paolo Banchero, their second-year player, coming in for his third year, and the Heat led by Jimmy Butler. This year, I think the Heat really going to take a step up. I think the Heat could be very good this season. I know that seems like it's coming out of nowhere, but I think they know the window is closing with the Jimmy Butler-led Heat. This could be the last year for the Jimmy Butler-led Heat. And I think they're going to make a strong playoff push. There is something to be said about Heat culture. I think a lot of their younger guys are going to keep getting better. Guys like Jaime Jaquez Jr., Nikola Jovic. I think both of those guys are taking steps up, especially Jaime Jaquez. There will be more on him coming up later in the episode. But for those reasons, I think the Heat could really be there. I think Jimmy Butler's going to play a whole healthy season, and I think he could play really well. Tyler Hero, I guess if he's healthy, he gives you some scoring. But I think the Heat are going to have enough pieces with their culture and one of the best coaches in the NBA to make a run this year. And I think they'll finish with a good record. I think the Magic are kind of what they are last year. It's not that I don't think their young players are going to get better. It's just in today's NBA, it's so weird to me. I feel like even really, really good teams sometimes don't win a lot of games. There's a lot of talent in the NBA, more talent than there ever has been before. I mean, there's guys on some of these really bad teams that are still really good NBA players. And I think because of that, it's hard to win a lot of games. And I think that kind of a lot of teams are going to be closer to the middle. A lot of really good teams are going to be closer to the middle. And some of the teams that are in the lottery are going to be closer to the middle. Because like I said, there's a lot of talent on a lot of NBA rosters. There's a lot of guys that can go out there and get you 20 points per game all over the league. So it's not really that I think the Magic are going to be worse than last year. It's not that I think they're not going to improve. I think a lot of the guys are going to improve. But I do think in the NBA, it's very hard to get past the high 40s in wins on a year-to-year basis. I have the Hawks taking a step back. I don't know if Trae Young can be the number one guy on the team. I certainly don't think so. There's other pieces on that Hawks team. I think they'll be good enough to win some games, but I don't think they're a playoff caliber team, not with the high bar that is set. It's funny, over half the league makes playoffs, and it's still even more teams make the play-in, and it's still difficult to make the playoffs, and I don't think the Hawks are good enough. And like I said, I don't think they have a true superstar number one that can lead their team. And then the Wizards I have getting a little bit better this year. Hornets getting a little bit worse. I think the Hornets might try and get the number one overall pick this year. That might be their goal. Not that you can ever guarantee it, but I think the Wizards and Hornets are in the depths of a rebuild right now, and will probably be two of the 5 or 6 worst teams in the NBA. Let's get into the Atlantic, one of the best divisions in the NBA. You can see here I actually have them finishing in the same order they all did last year, just with some slightly different records. I guess the Knicks have the same record, but everybody else with different records. I think the Celtics are the best team in the NBA. They were the best team in the NBA last year. Obviously, they won the title, but that team is so deep. They legitimately can go 8 or 9 deep and compete with any team's starting 5. The Celtics are just an incredibly deep team. I don't know who made the trades with them last offseason. I know the Blazers made one that probably was a little bit slanted towards the Celtics, but why do the Blazers care? They're in the opposite conference in a rebuild. And the Celtics just found a way to make really good trades to get pretty darn good players, and it didn't seem like they had to give up too much or sacrifice too much of their team to get there. But that's my rant on them. The Knicks, again, it's a similar thing to the Magic. I think they are a better team than last year. I think they're a little bit thinner. I don't think they have the depth, but that Karl-Anthony Towns trade really makes that starting five really, really good. It's going to give them, the Knicks seem to always play defense. I think that's really a Tom Thibodeau thing. And maybe you don't need depth in a Tommy T system because Tommy T plays his starters way too many minutes in some occasions, but they are definitely always good defensively, and I think Karl-Anthony Towns will help bring some offense. But that trade did hurt their depth. But I think overall the Knicks will be a better team, especially their starting five. They might have enough to knock off the Celtics. I don't know. The Celtics are a really good team. And the Sixers are another team that I think got better. I mean, the trade for Paul George obviously makes things better. This makes them better. It's not the Paul George from 5 to 8 years ago. It's not Pacers Paul George. It's not Thunder Paul George when he was a top MVP candidate. But it is still a guy who can give you good wing defense, good shooting, good ball handling, 60 to 70 games a season. He has playoff experience. For a team that has struggled to get over the hump in the playoffs, they have an MVP caliber player and Embiid. Maxi's getting better. The 76ers have a lot of nice pieces, and I really, really like their coach and Nick Nurse. He has an NBA title under his belt. So the Sixers, again, not a bad team. Just you're going to see it with the Western Conference too. There's a couple of races that are just so super razor thin, and so many teams that are good and in each other's area code that it's just so hard to make up 10 wins on last year unless you get one of the top 5 players in the league, which those aren't readily available. So the Sixers get a little bit better. I do think they're going to do a little bit more with resting and load management with their veterans, and sometimes that can cost you wins, but Sixers don't care about the regular season. They just care about making the playoffs and making a run. The Brooklyn Nets. I think they're a good team. I think they're an above average team, but I don't think above average makes you the playoffs. Thing gets you to the play-in. The Nets are still kind of rebuilding. They have a lot of pieces that I like. Cam Thomas, bona fide scorer. McCall Bridges, Iron Man, one of the best two-way players in the game. Cam Johnson is an elite shooter. They have so many guys on the Brooklyn Nets, and I think all of them are developing. They're going to coalesce as a team. I still think the Nets need that superstar player. But I think the Nets actually have the makeup of a team where one superstar player they have a really good supporting cast. They just need the superstar player, if that makes sense. And they don't have that yet, but they still have a really, really good supporting cast that's going to win them a good amount of games. I think they make a push for the playoffs that probably get towards the play-in, but I don't think they can do anything if they do make the playoffs. Again, I have them slightly under 500. And then the Raptors, I think after Fred VanVleet goes away, you trade Pascal Siakam. You still have Scotty Barnes. You still have a couple of nice young pieces, but I don't think the Raptors are ready to compete yet anyway. And I think that's evident with the record I gave them. I think the Raptors are happy to spend a year or two kind of bottoming out and adding young talent, giving Scotty Barnes extension, keeping Scotty Barnes as your franchise guy, while also trying to get some other players. And then the Raptors, before we know it, will be a championship contender again. I think they have a really good front office that knows what they're doing in terms of building a team, and even if it seems illogical to other people. Moving on to the last division in the Eastern Conference, the Central Division, which seems funny. They're the Central, but they're also in the Eastern Conference. It's like two different directions. It's always been interesting to me. Anyway, as you can see, not too much difference here. I have the Bucks winning more games than last year. I'll come back to them. Pacers and Cavs flipping spots, but still being around the same spot record-wise. I have the Bulls slightly under 500, right around 500, hanging around the play-in I feel like they do every year, which is sad considering the amount of talent that has been on that team the last 6 or 7 years, and they can't find a way to do more than make the play-in. And then the Pistons are going to Piston. I mean, I gave them 5 extra wins, but I don't know if they'll actually achieve that feat or not. The Pistons are still rebuilding. Again, a couple of young guys that could be cornerstones of a perennial playoff team, but they still have to add. They're still going to be trading away guys, and they're still are trading away veterans they don't need long term, and still trying to get high draft picks. Pistons are probably going to get beat up again, and then they're going to be, I think, one of the worst 5 or 6 teams in the league again. The Pacers, or I guess I should start with the Bucks, not the first. I think the Bucks have a rebound season. I think they feel like if they don't make a deep playoff run with this year with Giannis, they might restart. They have a lot of money spent on a lot of guys. I think Giannis has been making some interesting comments about his situation on the Bucks, and I think the only way to smooth all of this over is for the Bucks to make a deep playoff run. I think Damian Lillard has had a year to get adjusted. I think he's going to remind people this year that he is still an elite scorer. I think last year he mentioned he had some personal life stuff going on. It was an adjustment. It was the first time in a long time he hasn't been the number one go-to guy star of the team. And I think that it showed a little bit. I still think Damian Lillard has a couple years left on his career of being a dominant scorer. Not a great defender, and I think that hurt them sometimes last year, losing Jrue Holiday, who was a good defender. But they added somebody like Gary Trent, who's a good defender at the guard and the wing position. They still have Connaughton, Bobby Portis, an elite 6-man, Brook Lopez with one of the most unique skill sets as a center. I think the Bucks could still be really good. I think they're going to be much better this year. And I think Giannis and Dame are going to figure out the pick and roll. And when Dame can routinely make 30-footers off of the pick and roll, and you have Giannis coming off for the alley-oop, I don't really know how teams can effectively stop that, especially if the Bucks provide the same spacing they've had most of Giannis's tenure there. Pacers, another young team, Halliburton, didn't really play in the Olympics, but he had an Olympic season to hang around all of these surefire Hall of Fame players. Pacers are a young team with a lot of pieces. I don't think this is their year they compete for a championship, which is kind of funny with how far they made it this year. But I do think, or I guess they only made it to the second round. But Pacers, a lot of young pieces. They're going to keep getting better, keep coalescing. I think next year's the year where you really, really see them take a step up. Still think they're good this year. The Cavaliers, I just think that this current iteration of their team has hit their limit. Even if Darius Garland returns to what he's capable of and he's a 20-point-per-game guy, and you have Mitchell a 20-point-per-game guy, well, there's a lot of shots and a lot of possessions. Where does that leave some of the other guys on their team? Where does that leave somebody like Evan Mobley? I don't know. I think the Cavs have a lot of talent. I just don't know if the talent is put together in a way that makes sense for everybody involved. And that could hurt them a little bit. I don't know if Donovan Mitchell wants to be in Cleveland long term, and that could maybe affect part of their season. But I think the Cavs are still going to be good enough in the Eastern Conference to make the playoffs. Definitely good enough to make the play-in. Threaten for missing the play-in altogether. The Bulls, I kind of talked about them. They have too much talent. They've had too much talent the last couple of years to be as bad as they are. They should really be a top 5. They should have been a top 4 to 5 team. Alex Caruso, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. They had Wendell Carter for a couple years before they traded him. They even had Lauri Markkanen a couple years ago before they traded. They've had so much talent in and out the last 5 to 6 years, and it just feels like they can't get it to translate to wins. I don't know if it's a coaching problem. I don't know if it's a chemistry problem. They're going to be the same thing this year that I think they've been most of the last couple of years, which is why I have them being right below 500 in contention for the play-in. And we don't need to talk about the Pistons. Everybody knows how bad they are. All right, moving on into the Western Conference, into what is the best division in the entire NBA. The deepest division, where if there's one team that is going to get 5 teams in the play-in, 5 teams in the playoffs, I think it is the Pacific Division. You still have the Suns, who have now had a year to adjust with all of these star players, all of these star scorers. You have the Clippers, who lost Paul George. It seems like Kawhi Leonard is out, but they still have some other pieces like James Harden. And I really like guys like Norman Powell, Terrence Mann. I really do like some of their pieces. I don't think they're going to completely bottom out. There is a possibility where Kawhi Leonard doesn't return all year, and they just decide, you know what? The Kawhi Leonard Clippers era has been a disaster. haven't really competed for a whole lot, and we're just going to blow it up. I think that's a very realistic thing that happens to the Clippers. I'm not being that mean to them, as you can see, but I would be on the lookout. If there's anybody that's going to go from 50 wins to 20 or 30, I think the Clippers are the number one candidate. The Lakers, they have LeBron and AD. I don't think they're going to ever have a losing record with LeBron and AD. I guess they have had in the past, but I don't see it happening again this season. I think there's enough guys surrounding them where they'll be okay. I think the Kings broke out 2 years ago. Last year, they didn't have a bad season, but it wasn't as good as their breakout year. Still made the playoffs, still made the play-in. I think they get a little bit better this year. I think they're able to avoid the play-in this year. I think they kind of rebound off and are closer to what they were 2 years ago. And what's funny is I'm talking about rebounding and being better than they were. All of this is within like a 5-win margin, which in an 82 game season is not a lot. But this tells you in the Western Conference, especially, just how tight a lot of these teams are, where everything can be decided. Where 8 play-in positions can be decided by 3 games. So when I talk about the Kings rebounding, they didn't have a bad season last year. They just didn't have they were like 2 wins less, and that costed them like 4 spots in the grand scheme of things. And I think this year they win 2 more games and it'll give them 3 or 4 more spots. That's how tight things are in the Western Conference and in this division particularly. And then the Warriors, I don't think the bottom's going to fall out. They still have Steph Curry. They have more playing time open for guys like Jonathan Kuminga, who seems like he is ready to take a larger role on the team. They still have Draymond there. Draymond is an elite glue guy, if you believe in that sort of thing. And I think the Warriors are still good enough to make a run at the play-in. I don't think they can compete with some of the top teams on a consistent basis. But when Steph Curry gets hot, I would say anything is possible. Let's move on to the Southwest Division in the West. Mavericks won it last year and then went all the way to the NBA Finals. Pelicans are hanging out. I have them finishing in the same position. And then I have the Rockets, Grizzlies, and Spurs. I have the Rockets maybe not doing as well this year. Last year kind of came out of nowhere. I know they added some pieces. I don't think the Rockets are quite that good. And I think the Grizzlies are going to return to form. They still have a lot of what has made their team really good. They still have Ja Morant. They still have Jaren Jackson. They have Desmond Bane. They have a lot of guys from when they were 2 seed, 3 seed for a couple of years in the playoffs. And I think they're going to return the form a little bit this year. I'm hoping that as more time gets away from his scandals, Ja Morant leaves that behind and is the player again that he is capable of being. And I think the Spurs, I think that Chris Paul trade is sneakily pretty good. And I think Victor Wembanyama is ready to carry the load of that franchise, and I think they're going to get very good very quickly because of it. I don't know if this is the year. I think they flirt with the play-in, but I think they get very close to it. But I think next year is the year where you're going to see San Antonio make a run to the playoffs. But I think this is kind of that bridge year, but I think they're going to surprise a lot of people with their record. I think the Rockets lose games just because a lot of teams around them are going to get better and be better. And I don't think, are going to improve as much. I don't think they've done as much to improve. So I think just that alone is going to cost them a couple games on their record this season. This is another interesting division. I don't think it's as tough as the Pacific, but I think it is pretty good. I think the Pelicans are a playing team again. Again, they're another team that has a lot of great young pieces and just can't seem to figure out chemistry all the time. They can't seem to stay healthy 100% of the time. And I think that costs them being a 3 or 4 seed, and instead is what makes them 7 and 8. And I think the Mavericks, I really like what they've done with their offseason. I think a change of scenery might help Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is still a shooter. I think he's going to continue to be a shooter. And I think with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, I mean, those are your 2 primary ball handlers. Both of them can shoot. Both of them like to get into the lane and drive. Klay Thompson's going to help the spacing there. Derek Lively is only going to be better in his second year. I think the Mavericks are primed to make another finals run, especially if they come together the way they're capable. Moving on, let's get into the Northwest Division. So here you go. last year's standings, this year's standings. The Thunder were the big surprises, I think, last year in a lot of people's eyes. Made a run all the way to the number 1 seed, won their first round matchup, lost in the second round. And I think part of that is just their youth. Not a lot of guys have had playoff experience. They even made a trade getting rid of Josh Giddey this offseason, who a lot of people thought was a piece of their future. I don't think that's going to hurt them too much. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, very good at driving the ball. Very, very good. I mean, he's pretty much a 30-point per game guy. Even if he falls back to 26, 27, 28, I think they're okay. I think Chet Holmgren in his second full season is going to get even better. Just like a guy like Jalen Williams, I think the Thunder have done so well rebuilding, so well drafting. This might be the year it all comes together and they make a deeper playoff run. They have a lot of young pieces. Assuming they coalesce the right way, the Thunder could be in for a deep playoff run. The Nuggets, they have Nikola Jokic, they have Jamal Murray. As long as they have those two, anything can happen. They're always going to be tough to beat. They're battle tested. They've won a title. I mean, Michael Porter Jr. is still there. I think the Nuggets are going to be the same thing. They're going to be in the 50s with wins, and they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs no matter who they're playing. Because again, they've been there, they've done that. They know how to win in the playoffs. They know how to win a championship. As long as they have this current core and Mike Malone as head coach, I do not think you should cut them out of contention unless they get some serious injuries. But even then, I mean, Jokic proved he could carry a team through the regular season by himself. The Timberwolves, I pretty much have, I don't know if you could tell, I'm going down the list here, and I have the teams in the same order as they finished last year. So not a whole lot of changes in this, just a couple of win-loss things. But Timberwolves, I didn't love the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Got rid of one of their best scorers, one of their best players for, I guess, a little bit of depth. I mean, Julius Randle, good player, not as good as Karl-Anthony Towns. I do think he provides some different things. He's not an elite shooter from the outside, but I think he can make up some other things that he does well in the aggregate. But I think this was the Timberwolves saying, this is Anthony Edwards' team. We have Rudy Gobert at center. We can't play Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. I think this team is going to be even more balanced than it was. I think it's going to be good defensively. I think as long as they keep Anthony Edwards, they'll be okay most of the time on offense. Maybe their offensive numbers drop a little bit. I think there's a world where they don't. I think they do get better defensively. This is not really a knock on the Timberwolves. I think I have them making the playoffs. I have them being right there at the end. Somebody's got to regress. Somebody's got to lose games on the win-loss record, and the Timberwolves are that team. Like I said, I think the Knicks got the better end of the Karl-Anthony Towns trade, but it's still to be determined how well people mesh together, and I do think it made the Timberwolves deeper. I think they have a better second unit, and even though their first unit got a little bit worse, so maybe that's where I'm seeing some losses. I still think they're going to be a good team, and I still think Anthony Edwards is going to get better year after year. And I think eventually Anthony Edwards, especially as some of these old vets retire and get phased out, I think Anthony Edwards can find himself in the best player in the league conversation in a couple years, not right away. The Jazz, again, they're a team, they're kind of rebuilding. They have a lot of good pieces, but I don't think they're good enough to make a run at the playoffs. I like Markkanen. I like Clarkson. I believe that's where Colin Sexton ended up a couple years ago after a trade. I like Colin Sexton. They have a lot of good pieces. I don't think there's enough there for them to make a massive increase in wins and challenge the playoffs. I'll be interested to see, because it's not like some of their pieces are young, like Walker Kessler, but some of their pieces are getting older. So it's like, if you're not going to win now, what do you do with them? Maybe the Jazz make some trade deadline moves to get even more pieces back. Jazz are an interesting team for me to watch this year. And then the Blazers, a team in the midst of the post-Damian Lillard era, rebuilding that team. It looks like they might be doing it pretty well. I mean, they traded for Robert Williams, which I guess everybody kind of knew. He's injury prone. When he plays, he's great. He's really good defensively, especially, but he was out pretty much all year last year. He feels like he goes through injuries every single year, going back to his time with the Celtics. But the Blazers have a lot of a lot of young players with really high potentials, even if they're not there yet. Scoot Henderson seems like a guy with a super high ceiling. Shaden Sharp, if he stays healthy, super high ceiling. Donovan Clingan seems like he could be an elite center. DeAndre Ayton is still pretty young, the biggest contract on that team. What is DeAndre Ayton going to do with Clingan? Anthony Simons, kind of like one of the last guys from that older regime when it was before the GM situation and before blowing the team up. Simons is still pretty young. He's getting paid. He's one of their higher salaries, but he's still really good. They even have some guys you may not have heard of around the edges that seem like they could be good, like Toumani Camara. And so the Blazers, I think, are going to pick up some wins this year. I think that they have a lot of players that have super high potentials that it's just about developing them and helping them get there. And I think the Blazers are going to start to see some of that. I think they're going to see some of these guys get much better. And I think within 2 years, I think the Blazers are on a similar track as the Thunder. They very well could be. Especially now, that's assuming again some of these guys hit what they have the ability to do, but I think most of them, if not all of them, will. And I think they will have depth at every position. Again, the Blazers aren't there yet, but I think within 2 years, look out for the Blazers being on a similar track as the Thunder were after their Thunder's long rebuild. And I think this is the first year where they start heading in that direction. So without further ado, I'm going to summarize. I'm going to do this for the Eastern and Western Conference. I have after the records, which by the way, don't read too much into the records I gave. Those were kind of done like where I feel like the team is going to be kind of the best possible season, the worst possible season, and then kind of averaged it out. If you add up those records, they will probably not add up in a mathematically accurate way. If you add up every game in the NBA season, you have an equal number of wins and losses. I don't think that I don't think that my records add up to that. So it's really just kind of where I feel teams are going to be. Some of them are going to do worse, are going to be closer to the worst end of what I think they're going to do, and some will obviously do closer to the better end. So don't pay too much attention to that. It's really more important where I have them seated and where I see them. And as you can see here, I have them, the Eastern Conference seeded 1 through 15 based on where the records I gave, where that would put them. Black means you're in the lottery. Red means you're in the play-in. Purple means you are in the playoffs and out of the play-in. So obviously, when you look at my final playoff teams, that is me assuming what's going to happen in the play-in should this be the result. And in the Eastern Conference, I have it holding serve. Both the 7 ends up being the 7, the 8 ends up being an 8. No harm, no foul. You can see 1 seed Celtics. They're still the best team in the NBA. Unquestionably, in my opinion, they're still the ones to beat. I think they're going to lose a couple of wins, which is fine when you won the conference by like 15 games last year. I still think they're the favorite for the 1 seed. Bucks said I think they're going to rebound. The Knicks could very well finish as a 2 seed again. I think the Knicks and Bucks are the second and third best teams. It's to be determined what order. Heat, Pacers, both pretty good. It's going to remind me of 2013. I think if they've played each other in the playoffs, a 4 and a 5, a 6-7 game closely contested series. I think the Sixers have potential to be 6, 7, 8, like I have them here, or I think they could make a run at the top 3 seed. I think they have one of the higher potentials in the Eastern Conference. I just don't know if they're going to hit that immediately. And I've kind of talked about the Magic and Cavs. Magic, I think, are one of the best teams for the long term in the Eastern Conference. Like 3, 4, 5 years, they're still going to be making the playoffs, and they'll probably be a higher seed. And the Cavs, team to watch because they could go either way this year, depending on how their superstars feel about playing for the Cavs long term. So let's look at it for the Western Conference. You can see here, I don't need to explain this. It's the same key as it was on the last slide. It's the same situation where I just put them in order of what the records entail. And I think 5 through 10 was separated by like 2 games when I did this. So I think we're heading towards another one of those type of years in the Western Conference. It's going to be super close. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if a team like the Spurs or the Grizzlies makes a run at the play-in either. I think both of those teams are going to be pretty good this year, right around 500. Here I have a little bit more chaos happening in the play-in. Should this be the scenario, I actually think Lakers beat Clippers, Warriors beat Pelicans, and then the Warriors beat Clippers. So that would put the Lakers at 7 and the Warriors at 8. And then everything else would be the same top 6. So let's get into the theoretical playoff bracket. This is assuming, let's just pretend that what I predicted is exactly what happens. You can see here 1, 8, 4, 5, 6, 3, 7, 2. That's how it is going down the line on both sides. I see the Celtics being one of the favorites, making to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I'm not sure it matters who necessarily they're matched up with. I think the Heat are going to push the Celtics a little bit should this happen. I think the Heat have that capability. Heat and Celtics, I feel like they play each other every year in the playoffs, and it's always, or it's most of the time, it's pretty close. And I don't think the teams really like each other a whole lot. But I just think the Celtics' talent is going to win out at some point. Knicks and Sixers, that'd be a really bad draw because both of those teams have an argument for being a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference, and they probably are. But I think the Knicks are a little bit better, and I think the Knicks' toughness and experience wins out. Magic, again, I think long-term they're fine. I just think that there's some older teams that have been doing it longer that are not prepared to let go yet, if that makes sense. And I think the Bucks beat the Magic. Bucks beat the Knicks in 6 or 7 games. And then I think the Bucks, Celtics, and Knicks are the 3 favorites out of the Eastern Conference, with the Sixers and the Heat in like a second tier behind them. I think the Eastern Conference champion comes from one of those 5 teams, probably really the first 3. And I think the Bucks, I think because they know it's go time, I think that this team is ready to make a run, even if you only get 80 to 90% of what Chris Middleton is capable of. As long as he stays healthy and plays at 80 to 90% of what he's capable of, I think the Bucks have a really good starting 5 and are going to be okay. And I think the Celtics get a little bit tired. I mean, it's hard to play so long into the season, back to back seasons. And I think that's going to hurt the Celtics. I think the Bucks will be a little bit fresher just because they didn't play into June last year. And I think the Bucks will overcome the Celtics. In the West, Thunder making a nice run. They're the 1 seed, and I think they're better prepared for the playoffs. They have some playoff experience underneath of their belt now as a young team. Not only do they have some playoff experience, I think the team is coalescing better. I think that they are just more overall prepared coming into the season, ready for a deep run. And while I think the Suns are good, I'm still worried about the Suns having enough balls to shoot with how many scores they have. I think they're going to figure it out most of the regular season. I think they're going to be able to out-talent a lot of teams, but I think the young and hungry Thunder are close enough in talent, and they are a better put-together team and balance each other out more, and I think the Thunder get by the Suns for that reason. Nuggets in the playoffs, Kings are going to be a good team. They have been a good team. Just Nuggets in the playoffs, Jokic shows up, has done some incredible things. Jamal Murray usually shows up. I think the Nuggets will be too much for the Kings. And the Mavericks, I mean, Lakers are a good team, but Luka always goes crazy in the playoffs. Kyrie Irving was pretty good. I think the Mavericks found something last year in the playoffs, which is why they made it to the finals. I'm a little bit scared because there is a small part of me that thinks the Mavericks could be in for a regression season, and I, as you can see, have them literally winning the NBA championship next year. And there's about 10% of me that's a little bit scared they might regress a little bit, but I've already made my bet. I'm going all in, not actual bet. I haven't actually made money or spent money, but I'm going to make my bet with the Mavericks and saying that they're going to run the table this year. I think it's Luka's time. I think Luka wants to be an all-time great. I think with the start of his career, he has a chance to be a top 10 player of all time. And eventually you cannot keep those type of players. Luka is a generational player. You can't keep generational players away from a championship for too long. And if it doesn't happen this year, I'm sure it happens within the next 3 years. But I think Luka's going to get his first ring this year and beat Giannis Antetokounmpo when the Bucks in the championship. But again, this is all theoretical. None of these teams could make the playoffs in theory. Obviously, I think most of them will. I hope all of them will because then I'm right. But this is just how assuming the records play out the way I predicted them, this is how I would see a playoff with these teams play out. which is honestly kind of boring because now that I'm looking at it, I'm pretty sure both sides are the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds, and then in the second round, and then the 1 and 2 seeds in the conference finals. But sometimes chalk wins out. So here we go. I have the start of season power rankings and then the award races as I see them. I don't need to read off the power rankings, so I'll read them off for you, I guess, but you can also read them. Celtics, they have to be number one. They probably arguably got better in the offseason, and they already came off of a title in a 60-win season. Mavericks, Mavericks Celtics was a championship last year. Thunder, young and hungry team, one of the second best record in the league last year. Suns, a lot of star power. Hopefully it meshes. I'm still worried about having too many guys wanting to shoot the ball. Knicks, we've talked about them a lot. At 5, Bucks at 6, and I think they could ascend quickly. Nuggets at 7. Kings, again, younger team, good amount of talent, could find themselves around 8. Timberwolves 9. Then we have a group of teams with veterans and a couple of young guys in the Sixers, Heat, and Clippers. Again, those guys might fall a little bit, but I think they're all three of the teams are kind of in that like 3 to 6 range in their conferences. Magic at 13, Lakers 14, Warriors 15, Pelicans 16. And those 16 are the teams I have making it out of the play-in and into the playoffs, which is why they were the top 16. Well, I guess the Clippers aren't, but I think the Clippers are starting from a better point. They might fall down within the first couple weeks, but we'll see. The Pacers are the other team I have making it. I have Cavs at 18. And again, like the middle of this pack here, especially this like 10 to 20 range, these teams are all close. Like they could move up very quickly. They could move down very quickly. But for now, this is where I am going to leave it. Spurs 19, Nets 20. Grizzlies going to rebound up. I'm starting them at 21 because I'm expecting better things from them. Raptors at 22. And now we're going to get into some of these lottery teams. Hawks at 23. They might blow it up this year. I would not be surprised if Trae Young is not wearing a Hawks jersey by the end of the season. 24 Rockets, talked about them. I think they're going to regress a little bit, but not through any fault of their own. Raptors at 25, Jazz at 26, and then the Wizards, Blazers, Hornets, and Pacers are the last 4 teams who I think are all kind of still in the middle of a rebuild and attempting to get at the front end of the lottery. So now let's go through my award predictions. We're going to start with Defensive Player of the Year. I have Wembanyama winning it. Maybe that's a chalk pick. I just think he can guard the perimeter. He can guard the post. He can do it all well. He has such a big arm span. He might lead the league in blocks this year. I think he's good at getting steals because he can get a lot of deflections. He's really good at deflecting the ball. And I think Wembanyama can guard almost anybody in the league because of his size and athleticism. I think as long as he stays healthy, the Defensive Player of the Year award is his. I think Adebayo doesn't get enough love for his defense. Heat culture. He thrives in that Heat culture where you have to play defense. Again, he's a guy that has athleticism to go out to the perimeter, maybe not as well as Wembanyama, but he's very good in the post too, good rebounder. And Adebayo, I would say, is perennially in the top 5. And again, like a guy like Gobert, probably 3rd or 4th. I think Gobert is always going to be at the top as well. But I just see Wembanyama and Adebayo having good seasons and outdoing everybody else. Rookie of the Year this year is an award that I think could be won by anybody. I do not think there's a surefire Rookie of the Year candidate. There's no Victor Wembanyama in this class. So this was a really tough one for me to pick. Like, I think when you're handicapping this field and looking at favorites, I don't think anybody is by themselves as a 50% favorite. I think this is kind of a race where like even Edey, who I have as the favorite, is maybe closer to like 35%, but like as a favorite, but that means the field is 65%. The Rookie of the Year race I think is kind of wide open and anybody can win it. The only reason why I have Edey is I think he has an easy pathway to minutes, and I think because he's been in college so long, he has the maturity and to be ready for this moment. Do I think Edey is the best rookie? Do I think Edey is going to have the best career? Absolutely not. In fact, I don't see Edey. I don't know if Edey is going to have too long of a career. I don't know if his game is going to translate to the NBA like it would have in the 80s or 90s. But I just think situationally, Edey is in one of the better situations for him to have that caliber year. And then tied for second, this is the only award I did it for. Tied for second, I have Reed Shepherd of the Rockets and Donovan Clingan of the Blazers. I think Clingan, I don't know if he's going to score. Maybe he becomes a solid double-double guy. But I think Clingan can be a very important piece of that team, depending on what the starting lineup looks like. There's a very real world where DeAndre Ayton starts at center and Clingan is behind him. But I think Clingan is going to be really good defensively. He's going to add some to that team offensively, really give them a good paint presence. And Reed Shepherd, I don't know how the scoring breakdown is going to work in Houston. They have a lot of guards, a lot of guys that like to score, but Reed Shepherd can flat out shoot the ball and he can flat out score. That's what he's going to be drafted to do. So 3 very different candidates to me, all in the Western Conference. And but again, the Rookie of the Year race is the hardest one to predict, in my opinion. Most Improved Player, I'm going with Coby White. I feel like he deserves to win this award just as a legacy thing. He's been at the top multiple of this race multiple times in his career and never won it. He's a phenomenal candidate for Most Improved Player. He arguably could have won it last year. And here's my thing. I know a lot of people are saying Victor Wembanyama for this award. In my opinion, Most Improved Player is not meant for a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who was the number 1 overall pick, had a really good rookie season, won Rookie of the Year. Obviously, he's going to keep improving because your Rookie of the Year shouldn't be your best season. But I think Most Improved is meant for guys who maybe were drafted and not immediately good or kind of lost the background, or guys who came from the G League. Somebody with a that wasn't the number 1 generational prospect, right? Somebody that's had to work a little bit harder. I'm not saying Wembanyama hasn't worked hard. Maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but just somebody who wasn't drafted to be a franchise player, or somebody who wasn't already a superstar player, somebody that truly gets better and has gotten better that nobody saw coming. And I think Coby White has deserved the award a couple times in his career. So I kind of have him winning it just because I think it's almost like a legacy award in a sense, if that makes sense. And then somebody like Jalen Williams, who again wasn't a high draft pick, had showed some really good flashes down the stretch, was good last year, and I think this is the year that he is going to put it all together, especially because he has a lot of help around him that's going to take defensive pressure off. So those are 2 guys I have in that race. And again, I kind of handicapped it a little bit based on my own beliefs. 6th Man of the Year, Malik Monk. I mean, I don't love the pick, but I think I think I would have him as the favorite right now. He's a good scorer, and usually the sixth Man of the Year is usually won by a scorer. And I think Malik Monk is one of the better scorers that is in the race for this award. I think he's another guy that's getting better and better as his career goes on. I know he's been in the NBA for a while, but he came into the NBA so young that you can still kind of see him as a younger player. And I think Jaime Jaquez, I said we'd be coming back to him early on in the podcast. I think Jaime Jaquez is vital to the Heat, especially if they're going to be as good as I think they can be. I think he's going to surprise some people this year. I think he's going to have a great second year. I think he's going to lead their second unit, and I think he could very legitimately get to that 16 to 18 points per game, pick up some rebounds with his size. And I think Jaquez is going to be vital to the Heat success this year. Coach of the Year, Tom Thibodeau, Tibbs. I think Tibbs wins it. I think it's kind of funny because they won second place last year, or they were second place in the Eastern Conference, and I have them going to third. But I just think Tibbs kind of deserves it. I don't see anybody like coming out of nowhere this year as a coach to win it. Tibbs has a couple of new pieces. The team is going to look a little bit differently. I think they're going to, not that the playoffs matter. I think they have a chance to go farther in the playoffs. And I just think Tibbs, maybe it's a little bit like White where it's been building for a couple of years, so maybe he deserves it in that sense. And then Nick Nurse, won it formally, I believe. Really good coach with the Raptors, not with the Raptors anymore. Now he's with the Sixers. He has a lot of talent and a lot of interesting pieces he can work with, and I still think he's a very good head coach, and I don't think enough people are talking about it, and I think he could make a run at Coach of the Year with the Sixers. We're going to get into the All-NBA teams now, third team. And I would just like to say all NBA teams are super hard to predict. You never know who's going to have a surprise year. There's always more than 15 people that deserve the award because there's 3 all NBA teams, 5 players on each team. So very difficult to predict this, and you never know when an injury can change everything. But I figured it'd be fun to see what I would say or what I think is going to happen. I just think it's fun to predict that all NBA teams. So starting with the third team, I have Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, two Knicks teammates. If I think the Knicks are going to have some guys make All NBA. I don't think Brunson is a top 3 guard based off of talent, but he has a great work ethic. He plays hard and he doesn't like to miss games due to injury or rest or anything. And I think that's going to help propel him. I just think there's other guards that when they're playing to the best of their ability are probably a little bit better. Karl Anthony Towns, like I said, I mean, he's one of the best centers in the league. I think the Knicks, he's going to be able to increase his scoring total a little bit. Jimmy Butler, going to lead the Heat this year to, again, I think a really good season. I think he's going to play the whole year. And if he plays the whole year, he's probably going to be one of the better players in the league. Anthony Edwards, he's going to keep ascending and ascending as a player. He has all the potential in the world. Leading the Wolves this year, I think Wembanyama also makes his first All-NBA team and is on the third team after a great season this year. Second team is really a lot of vets. Curry doesn't have Thompson anymore. I think he could be in store for a 30-plus points per game season. LeBron is LeBron. Do we really need to talk about LeBron? Everybody knows who LeBron is, even if you're not a basketball fan. KD, one of the all-time great scorers. The guy is a walking bucket. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to be right there. His teammate Devin Booker is going to be right next to him, another elite scorer in the league. And Tatum, best team in the league. He's probably going to be the leading scorer. That usually gets you in the MVP talks, usually keeps you around first or second team. And then the first team is the guys that I think are going to separate themselves, are arguably might be the best guys in the league. Luka Doncic, he's there feels like every year. Jokic is there every year. Giannis is there every year. I think SGA surprises some people. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, it makes a push for first team All-NBA. I think the better his team gets, if he keeps playing as well as he has, that's going to do wonders for him. And then Embiid, it feels like Jokic and Embiid have been the MVP battle the last couple of years. I don't see that changing a whole lot this year. I think they'll both be in the top 3 or 4. And they will both be first team All-NBA. And then everybody's favorite award, the most important one, MVP. I think Doncic wins his first MVP this year over Jokic. I think it's narrow, but I think both players lead their teams to top 3 seeds. I think both of them have about the same amount of help. And it's funny because it'll be kind of at similar positions. And I just think this is the year that Doncic says, hey, I'm here. I'm in the conversation for best player of the league. And I think that's reflected with an MVP award. Once again, guys, thank you for spending time listening to this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps creators on YouTube so much. It helps me so much. Helps with the algorithm. Helps other people to find us. And helps YouTube to promote us. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Give me some of your favorite NBA season predictions for this year in the comments. Tell me what you think is going to happen. Maybe suggest a series that you want to see that we're not doing. Come follow me on X. Come back later this week. We have another episode coming in our NFL series that we do weekly. And again, keep coming out. Hope everybody has a good week. Peace.